Hello everyone, please like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our stories.
A long time ago, nestled deep within the endless forests of Wisconsin, there stood a small log house. It was built from sturdy timber, hewn by hand, and set among the towering maples, oaks, and firs that stretched as far as the eye could see. In this little house lived the Ingalls family: Pa, Ma, Mary, Laura, and baby Carrie. The woods around them were so vast that there were no other houses in sight, no neighbors to call upon, only the ancient trails trodden by wild animals and the soft, ever-present hush of the trees. For Laura, who was almost 5 years old, the world was a place of wonder and mystery. The big woods seemed endless, full of secrets and shadows, but also alive with beauty. Sunlight filtered down through the branches, dappling the forest floor with gold. The air was fresh and sharp, scented with pine needles and earth. In the mornings, a thin mist would curl around the trunks of the trees, and the birds would sing their bright, cheerful songs. The little log house was both a shelter and a fortress. Its walls kept out the cold winds and the prowling animals. Inside, everything was neat and tidy, and every corner was filled with the warmth of family. Mary, Laura's older sister, was gentle and quiet, always careful and obedient. Laura, on the other hand, was curious and quick, her eyes wide with excitement at every new discovery. Baby Carrie was still small, often cradled in Ma's arms or sleeping peacefully in her cradle. Though the woods were deep and sometimes dangerous, Laura and Mary found endless delight in their small world. They played near the house, careful never to stray too far. There was a little garden where Ma grew vegetables: beans, pumpkins, and sweet potatoes. A clear creek ran not far from the house, its water cold and sparkling, home to darting minnows and smooth stones, perfect for skipping. The wind rustled through the treetops, carrying with it the scent of autumn and the promise of change. As October arrived, the woods transformed. Leaves turned brilliant shades of yellow, orange, and red, painting the forest in a riot of color. The air grew cooler, and the days grew shorter. Squirrels chattered as they gathered acorns, their bushy tails flicking. Flocks of birds wheeled overhead, calling to one another as they began their long journey south for the winter. Inside the log house, preparations for the cold months ahead began in earnest. Ma was always busy, her hands never still. She dried sweet potatoes and apples, filling the air with their sugary scent. She boiled maple sugar until it was thick and golden, then poured it into pans to cool. She baked fragrant loaves of bread, their crusts crackling as they came out of the oven. Each task was done by hand, with care and patience, and the whole family helped in whatever way they could. Laura loved to watch Ma work, her movements graceful and sure, her face calm and kind. Pa spent his days in the woods, hunting for game to fill the family's larder. He was a tall, strong man with twinkling eyes and a gentle smile. He knew the woods better than anyone, where the deer would graze, where the rabbits hid, where the wild bees made their honey. Sometimes he would return with a deer slung over his shoulders, or a brace of fat hares, or even, on rare occasions, a bear. But Laura's favorite days were when Pa brought home honey, thick and golden, still dripping from the comb. It was a rare and precious treat, a taste of sweetness in the midst of their simple life. As the days grew colder, the family drew closer together. Evenings were Laura's favorite time of all. After supper, they would gather around the fire in the little kitchen. The warmth of the stove filled the room, and the flames cast flickering shadows on the walls. Ma would sit by the lamp, mending clothes or spinning yarn, her fingers nimble and quick. Mary and Laura would play quietly with their rag dolls or listen to the grown-ups talk. Pa would take down his fiddle and begin to play. The music filled the small house, rising and falling like the wind in the trees. Sometimes the tunes were lively, and Laura and Mary would clap their hands and dance around the room. Other times, the melodies were slow and sweet, and Laura would feel a quiet happiness settle over her. Pa would tell stories too, tales of his own childhood, of hunting adventures, of strange and wonderful things he had seen in the woods. Laura listened with wide eyes, her imagination running wild, picturing every detail. As night fell, the world outside grew dark and still. The only sounds were the crackle of the fire, the soft hum of Ma's spinning wheel, and the gentle strain of Pa's fiddle. Laura would grow sleepy, her head nodding, and Ma would tuck her into bed beside Mary. Wrapped in warm quilts, Laura would listen to the last notes of the music, knowing she was safe and loved. Though the winter winds would soon blow cold and fierce, Laura was never afraid. The little log house was strong, and inside it was always warm. She had Ma and Pa, Mary and Carrie, and together they faced whatever came their way. The big woods might be vast and mysterious, but Laura knew she belonged right there, in her home among the trees, where love and courage were as endless as the forest itself. When the last leaves drifted down from the tall, bare trees and the earth was carpeted in a thick layer of damp, brown leaves, winter announced its arrival in the woods. The wind, sharp and wild, swept in from the north, howling through the branches and swirling around the little log house. It brought with it the first flurries of snow, turning the world outside into a place of white and grey, where every sound was muffled and every shape softened by the cold. Inside the Ingalls log house, the world was entirely different. The thick log walls kept out the worst of the wind, and the warmth from the fireplace filled the rooms with a gentle, golden glow. Here, laughter echoed, and the small, simple joys of family life made the winter seem less harsh. The days were long, and the sun rose late, casting pale light through the frosted window panes. Laura and Mary dressed in thick woolen dresses, their arms and legs snug in hand-knitted stockings. Ma had made them woolen hats that covered their ears, and their cheeks were rosy from the warmth of the fire and the cold that still managed to sneak in around the window frames. The girls found ways to fill the hours. They played with their dolls on the braided rug near the fireplace. Mary's doll was made of rags, soft and comforting in her hands, while Laura's Charlotte, with her tiny black eyes carefully embroidered by Ma, was a constant companion. The girls would invent stories for their dolls, whispering secrets and acting out adventures as the wind rattled the shutters. Ma was always busy, her hands never still. She sewed flannel dresses for the girls, the soft fabric warming their skin against the winter chill. She mended stockings, her needle flashing in the firelight, and baked simple cakes that filled the house with the scent of sugar and spice. The bacon soup simmered on the stove, sending up savory steam that made everyone's mouth water. Sometimes, Ma would pause in her work to teach Mary and Laura how to sew, guiding their small hands as they learned to make neat, even stitches, folding the fabric just so and tying the thread tightly. Pa, when the weather allowed, ventured out into the woods. He would check the traps he had set along the creek, hoping to find a rabbit or a fox, or he would chop firewood, splitting the logs that would keep the family warm through the coldest nights. When he returned, his coat dusted with snow and his boots heavy, he brought the cold and the wildness of the winter in with him. The door would swing open, and a flurry of snowflakes would swirl inside, sparkling in the firelight like tiny stars. Pa's cheeks would be red from the wind, and his eyes would twinkle as he stamped his feet and shook off the storm. The evenings were the best part of the day. As darkness fell early and the wind continued to moan outside, the family would gather around the fireplace. Pa would take out his fiddle, tuning the strings with practiced fingers. The music would begin, soft and sweet, filling the room with melodies that seemed to weave stories of their own. Sometimes he played lively tunes, like Pop Goes the Weasel, making Mary and Laura clap their hands and sway to the rhythm. Other times, he played gentle old songs, Highland Mary or Old Dan Tucker, songs that spoke of distant places and long-ago times. When Pa finished playing, he often told stories. His voice, deep and warm, would fill the small house, and Mary and Laura would listen, wide-eyed and silent. He told them about his own childhood, about wild animals in the woods, and about the time he met a bear, so big it seemed to block out the sky. He spoke of winter nights, spent outside, wrapped in animal skins, listening to the wolves howling far away. The stories were sometimes exciting, sometimes frightening, but always comforting, because Pa was there with them, safe and strong. Before bed, Ma would read from the Bible, her voice calm and steady. The words were familiar and soothing, a gentle reminder of hope and faith. Then the family would bow their heads in prayer, giving thanks for the warmth, the food, and the love that surrounded them. When it was time to sleep, Mary and Laura climbed the ladder to their small bed in the loft. They snuggled close together under thick wool blankets, their bodies warming the cold sheets. Sometimes the air was so cold that their breath steamed in the dark, but they didn't mind. Laura would peek out the tiny window at the world outside, where snowflakes still drifted down, silent and soft. She listened to the wind as it whispered through the pines, but inside she felt safe and content. In the quiet darkness, Laura thought about the day that had passed, the games, the music, the stories, and the steady, loving presence of Ma and Pa. She felt the gentle weight of Charlotte in her arms, and the warmth of Mary beside her. No matter how cold the winter grew, she knew she was never alone. And so, the winter days and nights slipped by, each one much like the last, but each filled with small moments of happiness. The forest outside might be frozen and silent, but inside the little log house there was always warmth, laughter, and love. The Ingalls family faced the long winter together, their hearts light even as the snow piled high outside. For them, the coldest season was not a time of loneliness, but a time of togetherness, a time to cherish the simple pleasures and to hold fast to one another, until the first green shoots of spring appeared once more in the woods. In the quiet evenings of the deep woods, when the sun slipped behind the trees and shadows stretched across the clearing, Pa would return home, his boots crunching on the packed earth just outside the door. The first thing he did, always, was to reach up and hang the long rifle on its hooks above the door. To Laura, the rifle was almost as tall as Pa himself, and it seemed to her a thing of great age and mystery, a silent guardian that watched over their family through the long, dark nights. The rifle was more than just a tool. It was a part of the family's life, woven into every season and every story. Pa treated it with a reverence that Laura noticed, even if she did not fully understand. After shaking off the cold and taking off his heavy coat, Pa would settle himself by the fire, the rifle across his knees. He would reach for the brass barrel cleaner, his hands steady and sure, and begin the careful work of cleaning the rifle. Each motion was deliberate, each stroke of the cloth or twist of the cleaner done with a kind, quiet respect. He would wipe away every trace of old powder, every bit of grease or copper, until the metal gleamed in the firelight. Pa always said that a gun must be clean and dry, always ready for use at a moment's notice. It was a rule as steady and unchanging as the rising of the sun. Laura and Mary would sit nearby, their hands folded in their laps, watching in silence. Even little Carrie would quiet down, sensing the importance of the moment. The girls knew that the rifle was not a toy. Ma had told them so many times, her voice stern and serious, that they must never touch it, not even with a single finger. The rifle was something to be respected, something to be afraid of, just a little. In the wintertime, Pa could not hunt as much as he did in the fall, when the woods were alive with game. But there were still days when he would take the rifle down from its hooks, sling it over his shoulder, and disappear into the snowy forest. Laura would watch him go, her breath fogging the window, and she would wait eagerly for his stories when he returned. Sometimes he spoke of tracking deer through the snow, following their delicate hoofprints until he came close enough to see the flick of an ear or the flash of a white tail. Other times, he told of sitting for hours, perfectly still, listening to the sounds of the forest, the creak of branches, the call of a distant bird, the soft, secret movements of animals in the underbrush. There were stories, too, of the old days. Pa would talk about a time before the settlers came, when the woods were deeper and wilder, and Indians roamed the land. He spoke of learning to listen to the language of the forest, to read the signs left by animals and people alike. To Laura, these stories were like magic, full of adventure and mystery, and always the long rifle was there, a constant companion in every tale. With the rifle, Pa could bring home deer, their hides thick and warm, their meat enough to last through the coldest months. He could bring back pheasants, their feathers bright against the snow, or even, on rare occasions, a bear, its meat and fat a precious prize. The rifle meant food on the table, warmth in the winter, and safety when the nights grew long and dark. But Ma always reminded them that guns were not to be used lightly. Meat is a precious thing, she would say, but a gun should only be used when absolutely necessary. Her words were gentle but firm, and Laura took them to heart. She understood that the rifle was not just for hunting. It was for protection too, for keeping the family safe from wolves or from strangers who might wander too close to their little house in the woods. Laura remembered the one time Pa let her touch the rifle. Just for a moment, he placed her small hand on the cold metal, his eyes watching her closely. She felt the weight of it, the smoothness of the barrel, and she understood, in a way that words could not explain, that the rifle was both powerful and dangerous. It was a tool for survival, but it demanded respect and caution. Pa's gaze was stern, but there was kindness in it too, a lesson that Laura would remember all her life. At night, when the wind howled outside and the snow piled high against the door, the rifle hung silently on its hooks, a watchful guardian over the sleeping family. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting shadows on the walls, and Laura would lie in bed, listening to the sounds of the night. She felt safe, knowing that Pa was there, and that the long rifle was close at hand. The rifle was more than wood and metal. It was a symbol of all the things that kept the family together: their courage, their hard work, their respect for the land and for each other. It was a reminder that life in the woods was not always easy, but that with care and caution they could face whatever challenges came their way. As the seasons passed and Laura grew older, she would come to understand even more about the rifle and what it meant. She would see how Pa's careful hands and steady eyes kept them safe, how Ma's gentle words taught them to be wise and thoughtful, and how the rifle, hanging quietly above the door, was a part of the rhythm of their days. In the little house, surrounded by the endless forest, the long rifle was a silent promise that as long as they respected it, cared for it, and used it only when truly needed, it would always be there to help them through the hardest times. And so, night after night, the family slept in peace, watched over by the long rifle and the love that bound them together. That Christmas, the cold seemed to press in from every corner of the vast prairie, settling over the land like a thick white blanket. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the frozen branches and sending flurries of snow swirling through the air. Even the animals in the forest, deer, rabbits, and birds alike, had retreated to their burrows and nests, seeking shelter from the biting chill. The world outside was silent, save for the occasional crack of ice or the distant call of a lone owl. But inside the small wooden house, warmth reigned. The walls, though thin, held in the heat from the fire that crackled merrily in the hearth. The air was filled with laughter and the delicious scents of Christmas preparations. Ma moved briskly about the kitchen, her cheeks rosy from the heat and her hands dusted with flour. She had already finished baking a tray of gingerbread cookies, their spicy aroma mingling with that of freshly baked bread. On the stove, a pot of caramel bubbled gently, sending out sweet notes that made Laura and Mary's mouths water as they helped Ma with the preparations. The girls took turns, stirring batter, rolling dough, and sneaking tastes of the treats. When Ma's back was turned, their excitement was palpable, and every task became a game, every moment of work a cherished part of the holiday ritual. The kitchen was alive with the sounds of spoons clinking against bowls, the soft thud of dough on the table, and the gentle hum of Ma's voice as she sang a Christmas carol under her breath. Meanwhile, Pa was outside, bundled in his thick coat and sturdy boots. Each year he made it his mission to find the finest tree in the nearby woods, a tree that would become the centerpiece of their Christmas celebration. He trudged through knee-deep snow, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air, until he found just the right one. A tall, straight pine, its branches full and green, dusted with fresh snow. With careful hands, he cut it down and dragged it back to the house, his heart swelling with anticipation for the joy it would bring his family. When Pa returned, Laura and Mary ran to the door, their eyes wide with wonder. The tree seemed enormous as it was carried inside, its needles sparkling in the firelight. Pa set it carefully in the corner of the main room, and the girls gathered around, eager to help with the decorations. They didn't have glass ornaments or twinkling electric lights, but Ma had saved scraps of colored paper from old newspapers and magazines, cutting them into neat strips and shapes. Together, they strung these paper chains around the tree, adding small bells that chimed softly when the wind slipped in through the cracks in the walls. The tree, though simple, was beautiful. Its branches reached toward the ceiling, and the red and green paper decorations caught the glow of the fire. Each bell, each paper star, was a testament to the family's love and creativity. Laura and Mary stood back to admire their handiwork, their faces shining with pride and happiness. As evening fell, and the sky outside deepened to a velvety blue, Ma gathered the family around the tree. She opened the worn family Bible and read aloud the story of the birth of Jesus. Her voice was gentle and steady, filling the room with a sense of peace and reverence. The children listened intently, their hearts full of wonder at the ancient tale of hope and love. When she finished, Pa lit a small candle and placed it on the windowsill, its golden flame flickering softly in the darkness. Then came the moment the girls had been waiting for. Ma reached into a small wooden box and pulled out 2 carefully wrapped packages. She handed one to Mary and one to Laura, her eyes twinkling with affection. Mary's gift was a bright red woolen scarf, knitted by Ma's own hands. Laura's was a pair of warm, sturdy boots, their soles thick and their tops lined with soft fabric. The girls unwrapped their presents with trembling fingers, their faces lighting up with joy and gratitude. To anyone else, these gifts might have seemed modest, but to Laura and Mary, they were treasures beyond compare. They knew how hard Ma and Pa had worked to provide even these small luxuries, how many hours had gone into knitting and saving, and how much love was wrapped up in each stitch and seam. Laura hugged her boots to her chest, feeling the warmth of her family's love radiate through her. After supper, the family gathered around the fire. The meal was simple: fresh bread, roasted meat, and a taste of Ma's special caramel. But it was shared with laughter and stories. Each bite savored all the more for the effort behind it. When the plates were cleared, Pa took out his fiddle and began to play. The sweet, lively notes of Christmas tunes filled the room, and Laura and Mary danced in their new boots, their laughter mingling with the music. Outside, the wind still howled, and the snow continued to fall. But inside the little house, the Ingalls family was safe and warm. The fire blazed, the tree sparkled, and the spirit of Christmas wrapped around them like a soft, comforting blanket. Laura looked around at her family, at Ma's gentle smile, Pa's twinkling eyes, Mary's quiet delight, and felt a deep sense of contentment. She knew that they didn't need grand celebrations or expensive gifts to make Christmas magical. All they needed was each other, the warmth of their love, and the simple joys of being together. As the night wore on, the family sat quietly, watching the fire burn low. The candle in the window cast a gentle glow, a beacon of hope and peace in the winter darkness. Laura closed her eyes, listening to the last strains of Pa's fiddle, and made a silent promise to always remember this Christmas. The Christmas when, despite the cold and the snow, their little home was filled with more warmth and happiness than she could ever have imagined.